What's up, fellow lords of gaming, and welcome back to another episode of Marvel Future Revolution. Today we are getting into a updated deep dive into Doctor Strange. I promise you guys are going to bring this, and this is probably going to be the first of maybe 2 or 3 videos. I'm going to try to explain things in a general overview of what I mean by certain things in here in terms of the character. So let's get the first thing out of the way. Doctor Strange, where is he at currently placed in the game, and where does he sit in terms of the actual characters? So the truth of the matter is Doctor Strange is not the bastion of power that he once was. If I was to reasonably look at the character now, I would probably say Iron Man and Spider-Man take the cake in terms of power, followed by Black Widow, and I would probably say he's a good somewhere in there with Captain Marvel, followed by other characters like Captain America, Storm, and Star-Lord. Bear in mind that a lot of this is going to still be dependent upon pay-to-play scenarios and pay-to-win scenarios, because obviously any character that you're going to take and you're going to put a lot of money in, re-rolling things like stats and so forth, are going to predetermine that your character's more than likely going to be ahead of other characters, depending. Let's talk about why Doctor Strange is here. So Doctor Strange has essentially seen a nerf in terms of his character. 2 of his skills basically got nerfed. His ultimate gauge recovery got nerfed in the very beginning of the game, just around global launch. His ultimate gauge and his skill circular shackles were nerfed. The reason for the nerf of these 2 skills was simply the range and the radius on them was too great. They were wrapping up targets, and it made him somewhat of a beast inside of Omega War, Dimension Duel, and even made him definitely a prime candidate for game modes, that PvE game modes, whether you were playing Dark Zone or whether you were playing Blitz. He was a PvE beast. The problem in the game, as it said though, was that it appears, there's no confirmation on this is just me speculating, but defensive pierce didn't seem like it was working. So after the global launch, I think maybe they compiled more data and they got to see how things were working, and they basically instituted an update where defensive pierce became king. And as that thing happened, players started to complain, because they started to be like, well, I'm sitting inside PvP and dimension duels and things like this, and I'm getting one-shotted. I'm sitting inside Omega War and I'm getting one-shotted, and people really didn't understand what was going on. And what really occurred was that a lot of players had high defensive pierce, and it was unbalancing the seat of powers because a lot of people didn't invest in defensive pierce. Defensive pierce basically became the go-to de facto skill in the game that was 100% needed, meaning like if I was to look at a character's stats overall, you start to look at the effectiveness of stats. I've said this to you guys previously, that defense at some point was going to mean very little. If you played a game like Marvel Future Fight, if you play 7 Deadly Sins, and just about any net Marvel game in general, you typically notice that there's this thing with just basically being able to railroad people by having the most attack power. It's easy for me to develop methods for you to feel like your attack is being increased, and you keep chasing attacks, so that way you're dealing more and more. So even if you were to say, look at my Doctor Strange inside here, you would basically see attack is at 23,000, meanwhile his defense is at 13,000. There's not a lot of ways for you to just increase that defense stat where it's actually going to make a difference. Now this boils down to other things, right? So we're looking at overall the stats that matter the most in the game. So like I've just explained to you, defensive pierce became the de facto it skill. If you had a high defensive pierce, you were able to basically minimize the ability for a character to have a defensive value that was going to matter, and your character would blast through that defense and basically just overwhelm it. To try to figure out what levels of defense you would need to be at to mitigate defensive pierce is going to always be a hard thing, because you're going to start looking at attack, defensive pierce, and your accuracy rate, and some combo of those to see how they're affecting your defense in the first place. The other stat that really boosted up there, especially when the updates started happening, was dodge rate. Dodge rate became another one of the de facto stats that was like, hey, you know what? Well, this is really important. And at that point, accuracy rate also became one of those skills that was really needed, because you needed a high accuracy rate in order to counteract dodge rate. So for instance, dodge rate caps out at 75%. You probably need something like probably like 125, 100 something like that, 40 accuracy rate to mitigate that 75% dodge rate. There's no counter to the defensive pierce stat in the game, realistically. You know, like you would want to think that it's defense, but raising up your defense to mitigate the 75% defensive pierce that you could have wasn't really necessarily there. Meanwhile, other skills like crit rate and crit damage also became highly important, because that was going to maximize the number of damage you had along with your max damage rate and total damage rate as well. So let's look at that in a whole, right? Those were stats that I basically told you guys that were going to be important. Now we get a little bit deeper into Doctor Strange's kits. When we talk about those stats, that means at base level, you have to look at characters and examine how can they basically max out on stats. What is the method? What is their avenue of approaching the game in order to say, I'm going to, you know, I'm basically building the character as a base level unit is going to help me reach those stats. And this is where we start to see a lot of the issue with certain characters like Doctor Strange, Captain America, Star-Lord, and Storm, is that they don't have those methods in order to reach those stats at their base kit level. Let me explain what I mean by this. At current, if you were to look at the basic kit, remove the costumes, remove the battle badges, remove the Omega cards, and simply take a look at the character's base kit, that would be its specialization and its enhanced potential. Everything else about this is literally an add-on. Even your squad levels in terms of your squad rank and the what do you call it, the squad power, these are add-ons to the character, right? And they really don't change anything for your character as a base kit, because these apply to all your characters. So any effects that you're getting from these are basically duplicated across everybody. So everybody on your team is getting defense pair. So that means every character is zeroed out, and these are stats that they have. So it doesn't determine your character's base kit. You have to look at it in terms of that. What is the character's base kit? So looking at the base kit of the character, what the hell just popped across my screen? Sorry, I got distracted. So Wolf of Thor, something happened with him. But if I look at the base kit of the character, right? So I'm basically looking at their enhanced potential, their skills, and their specialization, because those are the only things unique to a character. So if we looked at the enhanced potential of a character like Doctor Strange, we could see certain things inside of the skill window in terms of how the character is supposed to play. So at the top level of Sorcerer Supreme, we can see attack, status effect accuracy, cooldown decrease. We can see defense, status effect accuracy, cooldown decrease. We can see HP, ultimate gauge recovery, cooldown decrease. And then every character has attack, defense, and HP at the bottom level. But I just basically determined for you that with defensive pierce basically becoming one of the skills, you can see why defense being in there as a stat is troublesome. It just doesn't matter. Now, when you look at status effect accuracy, you understand how this is a specialized stat. And what I mean by that is basically status effect accuracy is, there's two status effect things in here. You have status effect resistance and status effect accuracy, right? And status effect accuracy basically determines your ability to land a skill that is going to apply a status effect to another character. So like if you were going to cast any one of Doctor Strange's skills that basically had a status effect, that had a status ability, meaning it was going to do damage over time, it was going to cocoon you, it would like Spider-Man's cocoons, or like I'm trying to think of a skill, like most of his skills are really touch of Ashanti class skills and stuff like that would happen, but a lot of his skills in and of itself don't have status effects that are really great against another enemy. Like some of his skills have knockback inside of them, like if you were to look at like Portal Bolt, right? So Portal Bolt inside of here has a skill that it knocks back when the skill lands. Well, your status effect accuracy would be applied here, but is that a really great effect that's being applied in terms of knocking back a target? Not really. So like I really just care about the damage. So you start to see where the character's base kit starts to fall apart. But let me slow down just a little bit so that way I don't trip over myself and I give you the appropriate level of information, right? So going back to enhanced potential, we can see the status effect accuracy is literally listed as 2 of his his skills. But what we really want is accuracy at this point to counter dodge, right? When we look at things like defense, we realize this is a wasted skill slot. You really don't want to invest in that defense because it's not worth it. You want to look at other things inside here, and this is where you start to get to see even more about the character's kit in general. So you kind of get to understand that the character is basically meant to have operate on a cooldown basis with status effect accuracies, because those are his most important things inside there, other than the ultimate gauge recovery skill when we basically look at his base level kit understanding, right? So then we end up starting to have to take a look at a character's skills. How does the character play in terms of those kits and those skills across what skills are available for you inside the game? Well, people like Hafsin and other members of X-Force and some of the members of Sigma did a great job in terms of their damage lab numbers and skills and things like that they were panning out to show you essentially these are the most effective skills. Well, it almost sets and establishes a meta once we actually able to see those characters' effects. We understand why skills don't work, why skills do work, and why they are more pertinent to them. We're basically looking at various things to see where those skills can actually be employed. So any skill that is very, very specific typically is not going to have the versatility for you to actually equip and use those skills, while you're looking for skills that have utility and versatility. And this is the problem that we get with Doctor Strange, right? Is that his skills on a whole don't have a lot of versatility. Every skill and every character in the game has what is called a class. And so they separate specializations and kits within the class. You can see those inside their specializations to see how a character is being utilized. Going to the recommended tree will show you the way the devs feel like the character should be played when you are engaged in a attack focused build, a support focused build, and a crowd control focused build. So you can see right here, for instance, if I was going for a crowd controlled build, I should probably have more of these specializations equipped that are going to basically utilize cooldown timers for my illusion magic class. If I was going for a support focused build, I want to be using some of these status effects that were basically going to increase my cooldown decreases, as well as decrease in debuff durations. I could tell you this support focused build is worthless because you're looking at the touch of the Ashanti class skills, and if you dig really deep in them, you will see that none of the touch of Ashanti class skills are really worth you equipping, because by the time you get those numbers off, especially at their cooldown cost and their stamina cost, they're not effectively going to help you cast other skills. And this is where we're going to really get into the problem with Doctor Strange and his build. Then you look at the attack focused build, and obviously the game was attack heavy and attack centric. So this is where we start to see that this is going to probably be your primary method, your meta way of playing that character. So let me explain that a little bit better. So we understand how a character is basically supposed to be played, how, the developers feel about the game versus how they're actually played. This should be important for you guys to note, because when Danny Koo and Alice Pak basically jumped inside the game when they did their live stream chilling with Danny Koo, you basically got a real big understanding that what they prepped and what they did felt completely different when they put it in the hands of the players. It was almost as if they were unaware of the exponential potentiality of certain things to happen, meaning they thought we would be battling, most wanted and prime targets for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Meanwhile, we were downing them in less than a minute, less than seconds. Their inability to understand what they have cobbled together is showing ultimately in the game in terms of balancing out characters. And this is going to be where it gets interesting. If you look at the majority of Doctor Strange's specializations, his active traits, these were the primary mobiles for how a character was going to be differentiated across the skill sets. A lot of them, like I said to you inside the enhanced potential, focused on cooldown decreases, meaning if I was to go inside this active trait for reverberation, you can see that the decreased cooldown of illusion magic class skills, having them increased by 3, would literally decrease the cooldown of 25 seconds, 25%. You could even look at this one right here where we were basically sacrificing some of our cooldown percentage by using attack values. Wait a minute. They've changed something here. I don't think a lot of players will notice this. This is the first that I'm noticing, and I'm glad I'm noticing it in this video. If you look at the skill right now and you look previously at some of my other ones, you will notice that this Dark Magic, the Will of Destroyer, previously had skill cooldown where it was receiving a minus value, meaning that you were leveling up this skill representing a minus 15% cooldown on the skill, versus this one increasing the skill cooldown by 15%. So that means pairing that skill up with a skill like this one right here, where we're decreasing the remaining cooldowns of all skills by using an illusion magic class skill at its top level 25%, you're basically getting another 15% on top of that. And so every time you use a skill, you're basically essentially getting about 40% of cooldown to go to your skills, meaning you're able to rotate between skills inside here. This seems like a good thing because that basically means Doctor Strange should be played in a way where he's able to rotate through his skills continuously. If you looked at a game like Marvel Future Fight and you played him in there, I'll pull it up so that way I can actually compare it for you guys and show you guys the way he plays in there. It's going to take me a little bit minute to pull it up, but if you look at the way he's meant to be played inside that game, you'll be able to see how you're able to cycle through skills at a rapid pace inside there. So you almost always have uptime. This is very, very interesting that this has been changed now, where we've getting an attack bonus and a skill cooldown bonus. Hey guys, Netmarble, glad to know that you're halfway there to understanding why you're wrong and why this build doesn't work. So let's take a look at some of the other ones. Even if you were playing Touch of Ashanti, right, we have the school Wind of Truth, where we basically were able to use our Touch of Ashanti skills to increase the ultimate gauge recovery of our skills. But the problem isn't in the fact that they wanted us to play Doctor Strange in this manner, because that would have been a great idea for you to play Doctor Strange in this manner. Like, I'll pull up Marvel Future Fight for you guys really quickly. And you can basically look at his skills. So Doctor Strange has a number of skills that kind of are similar to the skills that we currently have. But let's go through the preview of the skills so that way you can see essentially how Marvel Future Fight wanted you to play through a character. Doctor Strange has some really insane cooldown values on his skills, which means that I could cycle through all of his skills at a rapid pace. Casting one skill and being able to cancel it and understanding the cancels and roll in another one, you can see the cooldown timers on his skill. They're 1 second, 1 second. You know, as I'm rotating through these skills, the times decrease in terms of being able to use them, right? So much so that that my ultimate skill is then up. So now I'm basically able to rotate through my skill, which is building up my ultimate gauge, right? And because I'm able to just rotate through these skills, that gauge builds quickly, which gives me maximum uptime on my ultimate gauge recovery skill. This is where we get into a problem with Marvel Future Revolution's interpretation of this skill, right? Is because if you look at a character like Doctor Strange inside Marvel Future Revolution and you managed out some of his stats inside here, you can see where he differentiates inside of Marvel Future Revolution. I can look at my character inside here, and there's a stat inside here that doesn't exist inside Marvel Future Revolution. That's attack speed. It allows me to cycle through his animations a lot quicker, right? His crit damage, his crit rate, these are things that I would innately have. You can see his dodge rate is maxed out as well, so that way I'm taking less damage because I'm dodging some things inside here, right? Now we're going to get into the problem with the build overall. Inside Marvel Future Fight, I'm not managing something inside the game that exists inside of Marvel Future Revolution. If you haven't guessed what that is, I'm going to tell you right now. Every skill inside Marvel Future Revolution, right, has what is called a stamina cost. Inside Marvel Future Fight, in order to cast a skill, the only thing that I am concerned about with those skills in general is this one item that you see down on the bottom. That is cooldown time. I am only concerned with cooldown time. I'm not concerned with any other stat, just the cooldown time. There is no stamina associated to me casting that skill. It's just cooldown. Well, all of Doctor Strange's specializations inside of his actual base kit take into account cooldown times, increasing cooldown times, or decreasing rather cooldown times. Like this one says increasing skill. Maybe this is worded, maybe they just worded it better. Increases skill cooldown by 15%. Yeah, maybe that's what it is. So they just reworded it inside there. So it's still telling you now that it's increasing, because this decreases the remaining cooldown. Okay, so it's increasing it still there. So never mind, they haven't figured it out. So even if they figure that part out, it's still not going to make a difference, because like I've just said to you, the difference with his skills in this game is that we are managing one other stat in here that doesn't exist, and that's stamina cost. So with the addition of having to manage stamina costs, we run into a major hurdle, because if you pull up that character stats overall, every stat basically has a max cap on them for where you can reach. Stamina can go no higher than 100. Stamina recovery is the skill effect that's meant, the stat effect that's meant to reduce or increase the amount of stamina that's regained after you cast skills. You can look at my stamina recovery here. You can see it's nearly 3/4 of the way in order to have that. So that means that you would expect that with that stamina recovery at 145%, I should probably be recovering my full stamina gauge at the very minimum, maybe 50% of my stamina gauge every 1 to 2 seconds, so that way I can cast more skills. But I can tell you without a doubt that is not happening. Meaning at this moment, the way the game is basically essentially paid, Doctor Strange's skills, you can see what his bread and butter skills are. So for instance, Book of Ashanti Assault is a bread and butter skill. Eldritch Sword is a bread and butter skill. And you can see the times, they're in the 30s. So literally 1/3 of my stamina bar is used simply on casting one skill. So I'm rotating in between skills that basically are casting out the ass in terms of actual skills. Could I switch off to other skills? Why, certainly, yes, you could. But are those skills going to hold value inside of using those skills? Are they viable? So when you get to some of the illusion magic class skills, you'll notice that they basically have lower stamina cooldowns. They probably have the lowest of their various class skills, meaning the illusion skills basically are like, really low cooldowns, or, lower cooldowns. The Touch of Ashanti skills are like mid-tier cooldowns, and then the Mystic Art skills, which are his attack level skills, have the highest stamina cost of all the class skills. So then you wonder, are the illusion magic class skills actually viable? And that's the part where we run into a problem, because they aren't. The ones that actually still require, the ones that you would want to use as offsets, they still have really high stamina cost. And there's no way to mitigate the stamina increase when you notice that status effect accuracy, or not status effect accuracy, that stamina recovery isn't necessarily rebuilding your stamina as fast as you want. You basically never have enough stamina in order to cast and keep casting all of your skills in rotation. You're always waiting for that stamina to be regenerated, even if the cooldown times are literally being nullified by their skill effects. Really, really important to notice that, right? Now we get into taking a look at the character overall in terms of their base kit. When we say, okay, so I see that my gateway summoning and my skills like that aren't working. What differentiates this character from some of the other characters would have been his, ultimate skill, if there were things included on these skills. For instance, Iron Man has iframes out the ass on a lot of his skills. Spider-Man has dodge rate on his skills, while a character like Doctor Strange is sat inside of his animations for his skills, and he's literally targetable. So with his ultimate skill, for instance, there are no iframes. There is no invincibility. There is no dodge amplifier being applied. There is nothing that protects him while he's in animation of his skills, and his animation times have quite the wind up. So you can see basically Soul Sunder being cast here. During that entire time in his animation, he is susceptible to damage, and he is susceptible to being interrupted. That's the worst part about it. So he can be interrupted inside that skill. He can be killed inside that skill. He can be targeted inside that skill. So it doesn't necessarily work. Now, they would have likely put inside these skills, and one of the reasons why they're here and they're bread and butter to the characters, because they have really, really long range. Doctor Strange probably has some of the best range in the game, but the problem is I'm not casting these skills as often as I would like. You can see I basically built an illusion magic class build over here. And I've basically tried to use circular shackles, which is a base level. I use that as a way to cool down all my skills at current, and basically being at a cycle between these work in terms of PvE, but you'll notice that the damage output inside PvE doesn't necessarily help me, and these don't work inside PvP. The amount of damage that's being reflected inside those skills is entirely different than for other characters in those top tiers, right? The only place where you have iframe invincibility for Doctor Strange would be on his skill like astral projection, right? But this isn't a skill that you're necessarily, you know, jumping at the bits to use. You might use it in dimension duels, but you're probably not going to use it in other skills. So that's the problem in a sense with the character. I want to dig deeper to let you know some more stuff about the character, but I feel like this video is getting a little bit long. But I'm going to give you guys a eagle eye view of some of the other problems that we're going to be talking about in this deep dive series. And that's outside of the base kit. I show you now how it's faulty, right? And I'm pretty sure a lot of you gonna have more comments inside the comment section down below to let me know parts that you find faulty compared to other characters, right? Essentially, we hope that Netmarble sees this, and that, you know, Danny Koo and Alice Pak and his team, you know, recognize some of these things, and maybe it helps them, you know, rebalance characters in a certain way. But here goes one way that they can immediately make improvements to the character for, and that is going to be Omega cards and costumes. We're going to deep dive into those in another video, but I wanted to show you something just to tease you so that way you automatically knew. With Omega cards, right, you're able to transmute stats now, which is really a great thing. Thank you, Netmarble, for doing that. It's definitely one of the stats most needed, or the things needed, so that way we didn't feel like our time was wasted. But this is where you start to see where characters start to falter. If you were to look at transmutation skills, you will notice that a character like Iron Man, a character like Captain Marvel, a character like Spider-Man, a character like Black Widow are already starting ahead of the pack. They're basically further out than the other 4 characters in the game because they have some stats that are exclusive to their cards. You see what I'm talking about? You see the defensive pierce, you see the supervillain damage. Those stats are innately there. You see on Captain America, he doesn't have those abilities. Critical damage decrease, guard damage. You see on a character like Storm, these things don't exist. Or Star-Lord rather. And Storm, they don't exist. But on Iron Man, they're there. Total damage, defense pierce. That means that these characters are starting ahead of the curve compared to other characters. When you look at uniforms inside the game, it's another place where you see characters starting ahead of the curve compared to where characters like Doctor Strange are sitting. So if I was to go inside my collection and look at some of the costumes inside here, Doctor Strange's uniforms basically have attack and HP and attack and defense. Meanwhile, if I switch to a character like Spider-Man and I looked at some of his uniforms inside here, I see a difference. Attack and dodge rate. I look at some of his other uniforms that he have in his most recent releases, Savage Shadowland, crit rate, and supervillain damage, his special costumes. You start to see how the characters basically start ahead of a character like Doctor Strange. When you have characters that are basically ahead in terms of how they are able to build out at the base kit level, and their kits start ahead of the other characters, that means they don't have to plan as hard to see where they're going to cap skills at, because if they're already starting with crit rate, crit damage, attack, dodge rate, and defensive pierce on their skills, they're well on their way. If you were to equip a costume for Iron Man at this point in the game, where I was to look at his Hydra Empire uniform, for instance, versus Doctor Strange. So if I looked at Hydra Empire over here for for Iron Man, defensive pierce, so he's already starting the game with 11.6% in defensive pierce before he even gets any of his, you know, his add-ons from his base kit level, which is really insane. And when I show you the potential on a character, this is where we'll finish out the video, is basically showing the potential at the base kit level for a character like Iron Man. We look at his base kit level and you see certain skills on his base kit. You see how he's starting well ahead of the power curve. He already has things like accuracy rate, crit rate. He already has all of those things in a play. So if I go inside his hands potential, accuracy rate, crit damage, accuracy rate, crit rate, and crit damage, literally, he's already ready to reach those heights without even having to worry about building them up any further than what they are. It's insane. Even 2.91%, even 4%, even 5%. Right here, we see his crit damage is basically able to get out to 8.29. That's 9% more than you have at the base kit level with a character like Doctor Strange. It's that important. His accuracy rate, if that was to get up to the same levels, we basically don't have to account for 1/7 of the level that his accuracy rate would have to be at for other characters. So we start to see the imbalance in characters essentially like that. But we're going to dive deeper on this. I wanted to give you guys this part 1 of this updated deep dive, rebalancing that needs to happen in my opinion, and I'd love to see your commentary down below. I promise that I'm going to try to pump out these videos for you guys. I enjoy you guys very much. Please, 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 there's so many of you guys viewing the videos. Please take the time to like the videos. Please take the time to subscribe to the channel. Every single subscriber helps. It is so helpful for a smaller channel to have subscribers actually, tuning in and getting these notifications, so that way you know when videos are being produced. Helps keep me enthusiastic nonetheless. So thank you guys so much, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Peace.